But when you get into a secret society of spirit worshippers, then, and especially when you're invited there by the direction of the higher-ups in the spirit world, you never get out of there alive. And he told us, he says, look, we worship spirits. We worship Lucifer and all his angels. They're just as beautiful as they did before they were cast out of heaven. He says there was a misunderstanding in the whole thing. He said among the inhabitants of the galaxies. And he says our master was misunderstood. And they always praise the great master, Satan, as a super intelligent being that he is, beautiful to behold. And if he ever appears to you, you won't be able to look upon him because it'll be too bright.
And they believe that Lucifer is good.
This is your boss's secret cabal.
This is their
believes
secret.
That the God that we all know is the bad guy.
Is the bad guy. That spear is the one that they believe when the temple is rebuilt in the city of David, their man, the person that they had handpicked, was at some point going to walk into the Holy of Holies, take the blade and shed his own blood, and then proclaim himself to be the Messiah. And then these sons of the fallen, they plan on ruling the world. They believe it enough to not only be willing to kill for it, they believe it enough to die for it.
And right now, they're trying to move in Jerusalem to make that new temple rise.
Yes.
So that this next coming happens.
Yes.
And that they will have, therefore, control of this world.
Yes.
Now, the key thing to me is you don't believe that Lucifer's the good guy in the story.
No.
You're not trying to tell us that all this happened, but you're saying that whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. But the idea is that these people still exist today.
They still exist today.
They're still out there now.
As far as I know.
And they're still either hunting for that spear or have that spear.
That's what they say.
That's a scary story.
It scares me too.
This statement. I believe that when we speak of UFO sightings as instances of space visitations, we are looking at the phenomenon on the wrong level. We are not dealing with successive waves of visitations from space. We are dealing with a control system. And he states, UFOs are the means through which man's concepts are being rearranged. They are engaging in a worldwide enterprise of subliminal seduction.
Jacques Vallée, is, at least at that time when he wrote that book, was an agnostic. Interesting that he comes to basically the same conclusions I do as a Christian from my research. And he said about UFOs, they're real, but they're not physical. They're messengers of deception. And this was based on his research of about 20 years. They seem to be psychologically preparing, setting us up for some ultimate delusion that is too horrible even to imagine as yet. I would agree with that.
Dr. I.D.E. Thomas is one of a long line of Welsh preachers. He is currently the senior pastor at the First Baptist Church of Maywood, California, and has authored several books which have enjoyed wide circulation. In his book, The Omega Conspiracy, Dr. Thomas explains the phenomenon of unidentified flying objects and offers an explanation that could identify the beings who operate them as incredible.
Scientists, in that they think in an orderly, rigid way from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. What really happens is that often you make some imaginative leap, which at the time may seem nonsensical. When you capture the field at those stages, it looks like poetry in which you are imagining without yet proving.
Paul, Bert and me were sitting together on the train and just free associating.
One of us, maybe it was me, began by saying, well, why can't we make a universe out of collision? And Neil sort of pitching in and saying, well, if you did that, then you could create all the matter and radiation of the universe. So we had this conversation, one of us completing the sentences of the other, in which we kind of just let our imaginations go.
And as we went along, at least I learned more and more about how it might be possible to have these brain collisions produce all of the effects of the early universe. And in particular, it's just easy to do with my hands. When they collide, you might have a big bang.
Right from the horse's mouth, we hear for ourselves the importance of imagination. When I refer to skeptical scientists, it's important to remember there is no united group of scientists. There are 1,000 different groups and many bitterly divided. I choose not to defend creationists either. They are splintered as well, and many of these groups are self-defensive, to the point of neglecting their pursuit of the truth. The search for the truth is complex. You are fighting your own bias, and a plethora of worldly agendas.
Ancient people saw weird things in the sky, and they were convinced that these were symbols of God's intentions. Their lives were controlled by the gods. And in every case that I am aware of, there is an alternate explanation. It could have been a meteor, which they didn't understand. It could have been some ball lightning. It could have been any kind of thing that was just totally unknown to primitive man, and so they always interpret these things in terms of supernatural.
Despite scientific skepticism, the history of human affairs contains many curious examples, not only reports of flying vehicles, but the presence of evil spirits. During his invasion of Asia, the mighty leader, Alexander the Great, is chronicled as witnessing UFOs. These incidents were officially written by his personal historian, Callisthenes of Olynthus. While crossing a river in 329 before Christ, Alexander and his men observed what is described as gleaming silver shields in the sky. The objects repeatedly swooped down on a column of soldiers, scattering men and horses in a panic. 7 years later, while attacking the Phoenician city of Tyre in the eastern Mediterranean, Alexander again encounters UFOs. Recorded by observers on both sides of the conflict, one of the objects shoots down a beam of light at the city wall, which crumbles into dust, allowing Alexander and his troops to easily breach the defenses and take the city. These flying silver shields description fit perfectly with the common UFO report of flying saucers. The beam of light is also significant because it corresponds to the many thousands of modern-day reports, especially the abduction accounts. In my documentary, The Nephilim, I unveil the evidence which connects the Greek gods with what the Hebrews call evil spirits, now called demons by Christians. The very same demigods in Genesis chapter 6, which were born of fallen angels and earthly women. It is my suggestion these same spirits, which Alexander witnessed, and known today as the alien greys, are responsible for UFO sightings, abductions and worldwide phenomena. Socrates openly admits he is guided by a demon and worships it daily. Alexander, a student of Socrates, later in his life even proclaimed himself as a god. He constantly counseled with spiritualists, Diogenes, and Sibyls at Delphi. It is obvious these demons were guiding the Greeks to rule the world, their original modus operandi. They physically intervened in the Battle of Tyre to fulfill their promise to Alexander. Early Jewish writings state they have been stripped of their apparel, go naked and have horrible faces.
You know, do UFOs have occult or demonic origins? But the idea of actually digging into the whole story from a governmental perspective, you're quite right, it isn't something, you know, I never really anticipated getting into at all.
Were you reluctant to go this way? You know, I see you at occasional UFO conferences. You're always so erudite and careful about your research and everything, and it would seem to me that if you were to tell your colleagues, hey, I'm researching whether UFOs are demonic, well, let's explore that for a second, because it sort of becomes an underlying theme in the book, is that the possibility that these agents and this agency that was investigating this stuff had somehow tried to establish communication, had opened some sort of a door, a portal, a window, and that things came in and that shouldn't have come in. Why don't you talk about that in an overall sense, and then we'll get into some specifics.
Yeah, sure. This was basically the idea that, you know, rather than sort of nuts and bolts spacecraft landing, as we said, on the White House lawn, the idea was that people, literally within the Defense Department, were sort of consulting ancient texts and books on demonology and using archaic rites and rituals to quite literally summon up these entities that, you know, the UFO research community calls the Greys. You know, they weren't trying to contact them by radio or whatever, you know, radio waves or anything like that. It was literally, you know, invoking and using ancient rites and rituals. And the story was, you know, that they didn't necessarily come through in nuts and bolts craft. The group actually came to believe over time that, you know, this was more of like a hologram type thing, that these weren't sort of flesh and blood entities. They were almost like a demonic intelligence, if you like. That in some cases weren't even sort of, you know, had physical form, although they could manifest physically in some respects, that the group believed. So in other words, the idea was that this portal was opened. Now, by portal, you know, in simplistic terms, we're talking about a gateway to another realm that some people would quite possibly correct.
Ezekiel 1:4-5. And I looked, and, behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures.
Lord, there, I see it, in the trees, the smoke and the fire. My time, my lad, is almost over. And the demon took him. Not me. Not me.
So I'm saying that I am totally convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, for myself, that there are such things as reptile aliens. Though I have never seen one, thank God, but I totally believe they're here. Not because of David Icke, not because of Crito Mutwa, who I love listening to, wonderful, fascinating man. David Icke has done great stuff. But I believe there are reptile aliens here because of my own personal research.